Be the same way. It is not Abraham Lincoln. Ulysses S. Grant gets mentioned quite a bit, but it's not him either.
It's not. That Martin Luther King Jr. No.
Anybody? Not Martin Luther King Jr.
Is it the mayor dude?
Sorry.
The mayor dude?
In Birmingham?
Yeah, that.
No. So what we're doing is we're kind of taking a look at civil rights movement in general, but we're kind of doing this from a rather historical perspective. So this is where the historical perspective comes in. Not in Letter from Birmingham Jail, not part of the Birmingham campaign, not Martin Luther King Jr., not Mayor, not Bull O'Connor, who would be the police chief that gets referenced quite a bit in there. Nobody?
Yeah, so Thoreau's ugly.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the debonair
I
small.
think the beard ruins it for him. I'm not feeling the beard. He's shady.
Anybody have a cellular or Wi-Fi device handy? Just quick. All right, Grace and Stella, you can do this too. Do a Google search for Homer Plessy.
Oh, I know who that guy is. That's like civil. That's the civil court.
He's a Louisiana French-speaking Creole plaintiff in the United States Supreme Court.
Where's the picture?
There
we go. Look at that. Another picture.
Look at him without the beard. He looks
Oh,
even
he
worse.
looks familiar there.
Oh, that looks like him.
Yeah.
Google is lying to all of you because that's not Homer Plessy, Grace.
Okay. Is
Was
this
the
him?
Plessy versus Ferguson?
There is no known photograph of Plessy, of Homer Plessy. But if you do a search for Homer Plessy, this guy shows up. When Maddie's going to do her Plessy versus Ferguson PowerPoint presentation in history class, she's incorrectly going to use this guy's face. So, shame on you, Google.
And he's probably uglier. This no guy would want to take a picture.
Why don't they have a picture of him? Who's this dude?
Because there's no known photo of him.
Who is this dude?
But maybe there is, and they're just like, oh.
This is Governor P.B.S. Pinchback of Louisiana in 1871. P.B.S. For, I think it's Preston Bentworth Stewart.
Is that all his first name or is there a middle?
First and middle name. I forget. I don't remember if Preston's right. But yeah, I think it's Preston Pinchback. Pinchbac. I think it is K instead of H. C or H. I forget. It's a K. He's Louisiana mayor, 1870, or not Louisiana mayor, Louisiana governor, 1871-1872. Temporary, fills in for office. He is, and I'm guessing this is where the whole Ferguson confusion comes in. I don't know exactly why completely. Homer Plessy lives in Louisiana. Plessy is known for, and the Supreme Court case, I think Page was saying it is Plessy versus Ferguson. And that's a Supreme Court case, 1896. The historical significance of Plessy versus Ferguson is profound because within the Supreme Court decision, they use the phrase separate but equal. And so this was legal. Apparently, I can't spell. But equal. So this became legal statute that you could essentially segregate. As long as you offer services to both African Americans and whites, public schools, restaurants, cinemas, movie theaters, those kinds of things. You could have separate facilities. Plessy lives in New Orleans. He lives in Louisiana. In 1890, and this is not on your quiz for Thursday, understand, but it's just giving background. In 1890, Louisiana as a state passes what's called the Separate Car Act. They don't have automobiles, but what kind of cars are going to be going around at this point? Not streetcars. Train cars. Railway cars. Were you thinking like choo-choo?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Start choo-choo. So in 1890, they passed the Separate Car Act. So now you would have separate cars for whites and blacks. Whites would actually sit in the rear of the train because it's further away from the engine and all the cinders and whatnot. So the front of the train is getting more of those things. The railway companies actually aren't in favor of this because what do they have to do? They need to provide more cars, so before you could squeeze everyone on, but now if only whites in this area, only African Americans in this area, you're going to have half full or empty cars, you have to have more for them. In 1892, in New Orleans, there's a group that is called the Citizens Committee, which is an activist group looking for, rights of African Americans and Creoles within Louisiana. Since you have a lot of different cultural, ethnic backgrounds taking place. In 1892, they decide that they are going to challenge this. So they, I don't want to say hire, but they kind of appoint Homer Plessy. Your job is to go in and you're going to buy a railroad ticket. And you are going to sit in the white area of the train. Plessy probably, and again, we don't know for sure because there's no image of him, whether you're talking about Library of Congress archives or anywhere. Plessy probably looked similar to Governor
PBS Hinchback.
Good. Governor Pinchback's the first. I think he's the first. He's definitely the first African American governor in Louisiana history. I think he might be the first governor in U.S. history. I'm not 100% sure about that one. Maddie feels a little confused at this time because what's going on in your head?
That guy looks white.
Okay, and again, it's black and white photos, so you can't really see skin tone and complexion all that much. He would be, and Pinchback is very much like Homer Plessy in the sense that he has mixed heritage. So he is Creole, there's African American, there's Caucasian that's going in. Both of them are considered, and by no means is this like public or politically correct statement or anything like that, but they would be considered octoroons at the time. That they are not fully black or considered to be white. Plessy could probably buy whatever train ticket he wants. He could probably sit wherever he wants on any train in his life, and he's not going to have any issues brought upon him by anyone. The Citizens Committee purposely picked someone of his phenotype or outer appearance to challenge this. So let's get this person. Are you really going to arrest him for sitting on the wrong car? Because if he were to sit down next to someone on the train, that person's probably not going to look at him and be like, why are you here? You should be sitting 4 railway cars back or anything like that. So Plessy buys the ticket, Plessy sits, and it's announced that this is going to happen. Basically, they're going, this guy is going to buy a ticket and sit on that train. What are you going to do about it? So there's a little bit of a kind of standoff. He is arrested for sitting in the wrong car, and then it just goes to trial, and then he is found not found guilty necessarily, but found that this is violating the Separate Car Act. They challenge it through state courts, gets all the way to Supreme Court. Ferguson is John Howard Ferguson. He's the first judge who rules against it in Louisiana, so that's where the Ferguson comes from. And the Supreme Court goes, no, he can sit on a separate car because that other car would get him to the same destination as the other car on that train would. So 1896 is when this happens. Afterwards, Homer Plessy goes back to making shoes. He's a cobbler, he's a shoemaker, does his thing, and that's pretty much it. Lives the rest of his days until he dies in, I think, 1925. Probably looks similar to Pinchback. Don't know if he has quite the debonair tie and wonderful beard going for him. But from a complexion standpoint, you you wouldn't look at him and go, ooh, that's someone who is whatever. In Louisiana, it would go up to what would be considered 1/16. So if you were 1/16 not white, then all of the segregated laws and whatnot would end up applying to you. I mean, it's horrible no matter how you take a look at it. What really, and it really ends up being more subjective than anything else, because for Plessy, Plessy his family came from Haiti. He was born in the U.S. So you have Homer Plessy. I put HP, but then everyone says Harry Potter. You have his mother. You have his father. On his mother's side, both grandparents are white. On his father's side, you have one who is white and you have one who is Creole. And it's here where they're going, okay, you're 1/8 black or African American. Now, not that, I love it when people go, oh, I'm 50% Italian or I'm 48.7% Swedish. Like, it never really kind of breaks down in that way. But the idea is that some folks would go, well, no, you're like a quarter. If grandma is from Sweden and everyone else is from Ireland, well, I'm 3/4 Irish, I'm 1/4 Swedish or whatever. They're not looking at family trees of everyone and going 1/32, 3/8 or all that kind of stuff. It's strictly based on the way that you look, and so it's kind of determined that okay, he would be 1/8. But again, there's no real logic that's going to be taken to it, and the fact that you're going to have segregated whatever is going to be abysmal in its own right. But Plessy versus Ferguson, from the Supreme Court standpoint, is certainly a landmark case, because that's where you have this whole thing, this separate but equal becomes an issue. It stays that way until 1954. 1954, Plessy versus Ferguson gets overturned. Anyone know which case overturns it? Here's a hint. There's a V in the middle. You're welcome. Shame on you. Diana? It is Brown versus Board of Education.
Yeah, I know that one.
And it's Topeka, Kansas, is the Board of Education that they're taking a look at. This guy is not Brown, nor is he the Board of Education.
So why is he there?
Thomas?
Is there no pictures of any of those people?
No, there's pictures of them.
He's just a great looking guy.
Thomas?
He is the first African American Supreme Court justice. Not ruling at the time in 1954. You did it again. You did the hand raise and then you took it away. See, Stella's now doing it. Stella did the hand and then she did the scratch.
I was gonna let Doug have his moment, but I think I
I don't know. He seems pretty excited now. Here's your chance.
Yeah. Doug, there's a lot
I'll
of
give
here.
it a try. Thomas Marshall.
Nope.
Perfect one.
You got the right last name. Yeah, it's Thurgood Marshall.
Close.
Brady, you weren't going to get that one?
No, we had a test last week, and that was one of our questions.
Is this one of the bonus questions, or is this actual
yeah, it was
question?
one of those questions, like who's the first African American? I put.
Is this Law and Justice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I put Clarence Thomas because
I had some people very upset for Superior that we weren't doing this last week. They're like, I could have got all those bonus questions right.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You've got over like 4 of them.
Whatever. Thurgood Marshall is not on the Supreme Court, Maddie, at the time, but he is the lead attorney representing Brown. And it's really Brown et al. There are multiple plaintiffs that are part of this case. Brown just happens to be alphabetical order, the first one that's on there. So it's the parents of the students. What's happening, and not only in Topeka, Kansas, but a lot of other places, you certainly are having complaints about the quality of education because they're separate but equal. What happens when you have things that are separate but equal? They're not really equal. They're separate, and they tend to be unequal. So like You know, we have first period AP English, we have fourth period AP English, we have seventh period AP English. They're all separate, and they're not really equal. I won't say where you guys rank, but you know. So as you separate, things aren't going to be the same. And so the quality of schools, the funding that's going into the schools, the conditions of the buildings and all that kind of stuff, and also the distances for which students have to travel is unequal. One of the big complaints that's happening for in this case, a large segment of the plaintiffs, of the population of that group, they have to walk to school. You know, there's not buses or things like that. And so some of them were walking 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, I think up to like 7 miles to school. Well, what are they inevitably passing as they're walking 6 or 7 miles to school? Other schools that you're not allowed to attend, that are still within the school district, you know, and not Catholic or parochial, any kind of private schools, but they would be white schools that are not, you know, meant for you. And so what happens is they finally do this class action lawsuit. It works its way through Kansas and goes again up to the Supreme Court. And in 1954, the Supreme Court overturns Plessy. So this ruling overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. There are 9 justices on the Supreme Court. What do you think the vote is for this overturning of Plessy versus Ferguson? 5-4? This is equal with first period because first period was saying 5-4. It is not 5-4.
6-3.
It's 9-0. Which I think people tend to be pretty surprised about. It's a 9-0 vote that overturns Plessy versus Ferguson. Ryan, no, you know, qualms about it. Why are you thinking 5-4? As most people do. Stella was nodding for you. And certainly, and with Plessy versus Ferguson, I think it was a 5-4 decision, where you had a switch in justices where you had more of a southern representation than before, where it was very northern. So having legalized segregation, I don't want to say made sense because it doesn't make sense, but you could see how the vote could turn the way that it did. I don't recall the total makeup of what the demographics would be of the Supreme Court in the 1950s, but they go 9-0, understanding that, okay, this does not make sense whatsoever. So it's a very emphatic decision, 9-0. Couple things, though. They do not say how to desegregate. They go, this is wrong, this has to change. But there isn't a template or a model or a roadmap of, okay, this is how these school districts are going to take care of it. Also, and I think this is the real important thing, especially when it comes to what's happening with Letter from Birmingham Jail, this deals only with the realm of education. And specifically, I should say public education. So this does not apply to anything else. So if there is a restaurant that is going, okay, you can sit over here, other people sit here, or no, we choose not to serve African Americans because you can go 2 blocks down and there's a restaurant that will, this has no bearing on anything like that. That's all part of Civil Rights Act, which doesn't take place until 1960s, after you have this whole Letter from Birmingham Jail movement, civil rights movement taking place. So this only deals within the realm of education. In 1955, there's another ruling, and that one's called Brown versus Board of Education 2. Was that a bonus question too? No.
I didn't even think about it.
The big thing that comes out of that one, because the complaint is, okay, there's no real setup as to how this is supposed to happen. What is the format, the timing, and all of that kind of stuff. Brown versus Board of Education 2, the Supreme Court rules that desegregation must occur with deliberate speed. What does that mean? Deliberate speed. And maybe not even as quick as possible, but you have to show that there is progress happening. But it does not say 3 years, or 5 years, or 10 years. It just simply goes deliberate speed. So based upon what your situation is, so long as progress is being made and you can, illustrate that it is deliberate and you're maybe not speeding towards it, but you're working towards it, you're within the confines of Brown versus Board of Education too. So it really doesn't end up being overly helpful in the sense of, okay, when is this going to be getting done? You have a lot of areas that you don't have integrated schooling until 1960s, 1970s. Some would argue that it's even 1980s before it really takes place. Pittsburgh in 1970s is still having a lot of issues so far as integrating Pittsburgh public schools. Massachusetts, Boston has a real difficult time with it. So it's simply it's not just a southern issue, but it is something within all states really that there is some kind of problems that end up taking place. One of the more famous desegregation instances and cases does take place in the South, and all these pictures are coming from there, where I was going to say, you want to guess a state? In Arkansas. How do we spell Arkansas? Arkansas. Connect-I-Cut, Arkansas. Those things stick with you all these years. Maddie, can you spell Massachusetts?
M-A-S-S.
A simple yes would suffice.
H-U-S-E-T-T-S.
That sounded good. First period said Massachusetts was like the hard one to spell. I don't know.
No, Connecticut. I don't think I can spell
I
Connecticut.
can select I.
Connect-I-Cut.
Oh, I wasn't listening.
Yeah, you never are. You're still thinking about Michigan State, game planning, cover two
I'm thinking
defense.
about Ohio State. I'm looking at
Well, Brady, you look ahead, that's when things happen.
Okay,
Little Rock, Arkansas, you have what's referred to as the Little Rock Nine. Not a baseball team. And this is taking place here in 1957. Little Rock has, not so much maybe decided, but Little Rock is going to desegregate the high school. What's going to happen is they're going to take 9 African American students and they are going to come into Little Rock's main high school. They're not going to do a full desegregation because I feel like there's going to be too much chaos that's going to take place. So African American community picks 9 students who they think would be best equipped to help desegregate and transition into integrated schooling. So you're looking for students who are successful. You're also looking for personalities. You talk like sports history, Jackie Robinson, breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball. One of the reasons that he was successful doing it was he didn't necessarily always kind of fight back when being egged upon and was able to, internally, take a lot of stuff, which might not have been good for his health in the long term. But you're taking students who you feel will be best equipped to be able to handle this. The governor of Arkansas is Orville Faubus. The governor of Arkansas is not in favor of this happening. So what he does about a week before school starts, and this is not them, but a week before school start, he gets the National Guard and tells them that you are going to be here on the first day of school and you are going to prevent African American students from coming into the building. So, you're going to go to school with your book bag and notebook and all that kind of stuff, and the Arkansas National Guard is going to say, no, you can't do that. Which is illegal, okay, because of Brown versus Board of Education. Eisenhower is president at the time. Eisenhower catches wind as to what Faubus is going to be doing with the National Guard, so he calls in the 101st Airborne Division. So it was in World War II. It's not that all the veterans from World War II are going to be coming in with their B-52s and paratrooping in. But basically what you have is you have now federal military telling state that you have to stand down. And plus the president is the commander-in-chief. So we have, edict, mandate from the commander-in-chief to stand down. The National Guard has to stand down. So the 101st Airborne comes in. Again, they're not rolling in with tanks or paratrooping or anything like that. Eisenhower purposely has the white members of the 101st Airborne comes in. He does not have any African Americans in the 101st come in because he feels like that's going to kind of cause more chaos that could potentially take place. But literally on the first day of school, you do have military personnel who are there to make sure that they get into the building. Now, what they cannot do is prevent people from voicing their displeasure. And so there certainly is a lot of that taking place, whether it be students, whether it be parents, male, female, and certainly even just like other citizens are going to be there expressing their displeasure at students coming in. Of the 9 students, and so like imagine being this girl, like you're probably holding onto that binder harder than anything else you've ever held in your life as you're trying to walk in the building. Of the 9 students, only 1 ultimately graduates. Ernest Green is the only one who graduates. The rest either transfer out, decide this isn't worth it. You have some cases where students are expelled. You have one student at lunch who's dealing with racial taunts and people are spitting at her and all that stuff. So she takes her bowl of chili and dumps it on the kid's head. Who was doing that. Maddie says no suspension, but she was expelled for that. So only 1 student ends up eventually graduating, doesn't graduate in 1957. What happens though, so in Little Rock in 1957, you have all this chaos that is taking place. What ends up happening then is in 1958, in Little Rock, 1958 is referred to as, quote unquote, the lost year. Anyone know why? Or any guesses as to why it's the lost year? What's happening tomorrow in our region? Fake news.
Oh, that affects my brother.
What?
President's coming to town.
So the president is coming in, and security and all that kind of stuff. There's road closures that are taking place, with conference that's happening and all that stuff. And what's happening with your brother?
He doesn't know the school's going to be canceled tomorrow.
Where's he at? Point Park.
He-
Probably not going to yell at you if you don't show up, because it's going to be difficult to get there. Not all of them are shut down, but I think it's at least 12 that are shut down. If I were still in high school, I wouldn't have school tomorrow. John A. Brashear High School will be closed. Class 98, go Bulls. So schools are shutting down. Guess what happens in 1958? School shut down. So in Little Rock, and other districts kind of start to mimic it, school shut down. What's the reasoning? Well, rather than desegregating or integrating and teaching both, we're just not going to teach anyone. Now, it's not that, on August the 15th, 1958, they go to schools closed, but it's basically like random cancellations will take place. So there could be school for everyone on the first day, and then the second day of school, the elementary schools might close, and then the third day of school, the high school's closed. And then the 4th day of school, everyone's closed. And then they're all open again. And then they're closed for a week and all this kind of stuff. There's a whole bunch of chaos that ends up taking place. Majority of the students and parents of the students who go to the schools are still white. What starts to happen from their perspective? Pardon? They get angry. And they don't really get angry at the school board, but who do they get angry at? The students, the African American community is pushing for this desegregation, because you're going to get the argument 10 years ago we didn't have this nonsense, 5 years ago we didn't have this nonsense, but there was a different kind of nonsense with segregated schooling taking place. So what ends up happening is you have a lot of pressure now being put on the African American community to kind of go back to segregated schooling. In '59, Supreme Court, federal government puts foot down that no, you must open up all schools. You have to move forward with deliberate speed, because closing schools and things of that nature is certainly not going to be deliberate speed. So just because you do have this overturning in 1954, it's certainly still setting up a lot of battles to take place. And what this will transition into us for tomorrow is we'll specifically start to take a look at what's going on in Birmingham in early 1960s, 1963. It's going to be bringing King into Birmingham with the Birmingham campaign.
I just wanted to say how ridiculous the people behind her look.
In the second photo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ridiculous they look.
I'm pretty sure it's these two that when Oprah still had her show, she had the two of them together. And it was very apologetic, situation as opposed to I'm trying to yell at you, but yeah. And in a lot of the photos, I think people are kind